and welcome to Fierce Fatty Meats. And I'm here today with Cicely Blain, who is just a total badass. Hi, Cicely.
Hello, thanks for having me.
You are so welcome. Thank you for being here. When I the reason that I know you is that I went to Sonia Renee Taylor's book tour, and you were hosting it. You were like the MC, right? And I was like,
Yeah.
Who is this British queen? I need to know her. What the heck? Why is she not in my life in Vancouver? And then I signed up to your email list, and last week we did a feminist wine paint night, which was incredible. I want to show you the thing that I made.
That's pretty cool.
It says Fierce Fatty. I don't know if you can see. But that's what I did in our feminist wine night. So basically, you rock.
Oh, thank you.
So tell us more about you and your business.
So I founded Black Lives Matter in 2016, and then through that, a lot of people were kind of like really interested in the work that I do, and so many people became really interested in making change around Vancouver and like making spaces more inclusive, more accessible. And so they would reach out to me and ask me to, I don't know, consult or like facilitate anti-oppression workshops. And over time, I decided I should probably get paid more for that. And so I wanted to just create my own platform where I could do that, where I could go into different organizations, different industries, and try to make those changes. All across like schools, businesses, nonprofits, and try to encourage people to be more inclusive, be more accessible, think about diversity and inclusion as like a core value of the work that they do. Yeah.
Right. That is incredible. So what would you say, what tips would you give to people if they want to create an inclusive environment, maybe at work or wherever they're at?
Yeah, I think one of the things that people don't realize is that it's definitely an ongoing process. A lot of people want to like bring me in for like an hour workshop, and I'm like, you can't solve all the world's issues of oppression in an hour. And it's like, it's an ongoing relationship, and it's a process where you really have to commit and you have to change the company culture from within. A lot of people want to like, they identify like diverse hiring as one of their things that they're focusing on, but I'm like, first you need to change the internal structure of the organization so that if you start to hire more women, if you start to hire more people of color, then when they come in and they're working there, it's a safer environment that's free from discrimination and harassment. So yeah, I would say that definitely it starts from within. It starts from leadership being aware of different systemic issues and how that impacts people, and really kind of focusing on how people show up to work and allowing them to actually feel like their identity is valued and respected so that they can show up in their full selves and actually do the best work that they can.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you ever get any pushback from the people that you're working with, and if they say, if you suggest, hey, do this, or how about not saying that, and people getting hot under the collar? Do you ever get that?
Definitely. I think it's very stressful for a lot of people to be vulnerable about issues like gender, race, sexuality. Like a lot of people, especially within a workplace, it's so unusual to be talking about those things that make us feel vulnerable or emotional, because when we go to work, we're expected to, be super professional and like erase any like form of our personal identity or how we feel about things. And so these conversations actually really encourage people to listen to one another and to open up about how certain comments or certain instances make them feel. So there is definitely a lot of pushback, but I try really hard to recognize that that's coming from a place of vulnerability and rather than maliciousness. And oftentimes it's, a lot of organizations are structured in a way that like white men have the most power, and so it's often talking to them about, like, how can we spread some of that power out? How can we give other people more opportunities? And that's really scary for them because they feel threatened, that their privilege or their position of power is going to be taken away. But I try to frame it more from a place of, like, we just have to be compassionate with one another, and it's a responsibility that comes with privilege and comes with power to be allies and to uplift other people who aren't getting those opportunities. So for a lot of people, it's definitely a very long, ongoing conversation to get to that point where they realize it's not about stripping them of their achievements or their status or their power. It's about how can we level the playing field a bit and allow other people to access what some people more easily have access to.
Yeah, so interesting. I would love to be involved with an organization that hires you. That's just, that's so incredible. At UBC, I have taught the MBA classes about privilege and sexism in the workplace, because they're going to be the leaders of tomorrow. And I find it so interesting, the reactions of different people in the group. Some people are like, yes, this is amazing. Finally, I'm being heard. And a lot of other people are more like, but women can be sexist, and I've been sexually harassed, and I'm a man, and they get really defensive. And I'm like, yeah, it's okay that you have privilege. Like, relax. Yeah. So interesting. So tell us about it's going to be Pride here. Pride Parade is going to be here in Vancouver soon. Tell us about your involvement with that.
So for a few years now, Black Lives Matter Vancouver has been really advocating for greater inclusion of queer and trans people of color, and specifically Black and Indigenous people who are queer, trans, and two-spirit. And we've found that we've sort of hit a bit of a wall with the LGBT community in Vancouver, people not being open to greater inclusion, which is sort of ironic because Pride itself comes from a place of, queer and trans people wanting to feel included. But I think when certain communities within the community start to get more privilege, for example, like being a white gay man in Vancouver is, pretty easy. Like, it's a very inclusive city. Gay marriage has been legal for over 10 years. So there's some privileges that some people have elevated into, while other communities have sort of been left behind. For example, like Black trans women experience some of the highest rates of violence in the world, and the rest of the LGBT community doesn't really recognize that, or doesn't really rally around them or perform or do allyship in a way that they should. So we've been kind of trying to have these conversations of, we are all part of this community regardless of race, and there needs to be a greater effort to include those people. So we've been, for the past couple of years, campaigning to have police removed from the Pride Parade, because institutionally police represent different forms of violence, particularly towards Black communities. I mean, that's no secret. Like, everybody's quite aware of the way that police brutality particularly impacts Black and Indigenous people, even here in Canada. And so to have the police being celebrated in a parade that is traditionally for marginalized communities doesn't really make sense. So what we've been doing is having our own annual march on July 21st. And it's our own pride. It's a march that kind of remembers and celebrates the origins of Pride, which was Black and Latinx trans women fighting against police violence. And so we're honoring that history and kind of celebrating all different intersections of the community. And we're going to have performers and speakers that are more marginalized and don't often get the space to speak or get the spotlight. So we just want to create an alternative narrative from the one that exists around Pride in Vancouver.
Yeah, I had never considered the fact that the police are present and marching could be problematic. It hadn't even entered my brain. But obviously, now you mention it, like, duh, wow. And so how can straight folks or like queer, you mentioned queer white men have more privilege. So how can those with more privilege be a better ally?
I think it definitely starts with listening. One of the issues is that because the Black population in Vancouver is so small, a lot of people kind of silence us or kind of dismiss what we're saying because they're like, oh, that's not an issue. That's an American thing. Stop bringing these American issues to Canada, blah, blah, blah. But like, there are so many instances of police violence that happen here. And I think, just educating yourself around what's going on, reading up, about how those things manifest in Canada. Like, so many people don't even know that slavery existed in Canada as well. So it really starts with that like foundational knowledge that, it just encourages people to have more awareness around the experiences of Black people, and just showing up physically or online to our events, or sharing, educating other people who are maybe more resistant, because it's a lot of emotional work for us to continue to like educate people and explain to people why our lives matter. So it's really helpful when allies also participate in that work as well. And, talk to their friends about it, talk to their colleagues about it, and say, this is why I think this is important. And I think you should too.
Perfect. And so on July 21st, when you have the march, then allies are allowed to join?
Yeah, it's absolutely. It's for everyone. Last year we had maybe 2,000 people, so we're hoping it's bigger this year. And it's going to be a march along Davie Street. It's just, it's super fun. Obviously, it has political origins, but it's mainly fun event, music, marching, and then it ends at Alexandra Park at the bottom of Davie Street, where there's more performances as well. And it's like all ages, family friendly.
And I'll make sure that I share the link along with this video so that people in the Vancouver area can come join. I'm going to check my calendar.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell me, you have something called the Radical Professionals Breakfast Club. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I decided that a lot of people were really interested in the work that I was doing and learning more about diversity and inclusion, or like including social justice values into the workplace. But they were like freelancers or, working for a small company that wouldn't necessarily be able to hire me as a consultant, but they were still really interested in, getting involved in the conversation. So I wanted to host this kind of crash course in diversity and inclusion from an anti-oppression lens. So that, people could come and have these conversations and then maybe take it back to their workplace or take it back to their communities or where they volunteer. So it started yesterday and it was really great. The cohort is 10 people, and we just basically spend a couple of hours in the morning talking about like systems of oppression, and then next week we're going to go into like how to actually combat those things, how to be an ally, how to be an active bystander. So hopefully at the end people walk away with concrete tips and concrete tools to actually combat oppression in their daily lives.
Incredible. And so if people sign up to your email list, then they'll hear about these things. And as well, you have digital things too. I know that I bought a webinar from you, right? So those who are not in Vancouver, tell us about this digital product they can buy.
Yeah, absolutely. I try to do webinars around every other month, and I connect with different people all across the world to talk about different areas of inclusion that they're working on. So the first one I did was around creating a socially conscious business, and that's available on my website. And then I did a collaboration with a mortgage advisor in Las Vegas, and she's a Black woman, and she's really passionate about inspiring other Black women to be financially independent and be able to own their own home eventually, which doesn't apply to a lot of people in Vancouver, but it was very helpful to just kind of get her advice on like how to feel empowered and how to feel feel interested and excited about finances and about owning your own home, or like even just getting more tips and more skills about financial independence. So it's really exciting to talk with so many different people from across the world who are doing different elements of diversity and inclusion in their own small way, because I had never considered talking to a mortgage advisor or like getting into the financial world, but it's really helpful to know that there are people who are genuinely committed to creating more equity and more accessibility in their own way.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, it's probably not a thing in Vancouver. For those who are not in Vancouver, it's because Vancouver house prices are astronomical, and young people may not ever be able to buy a house because they're $1 bajillion for like a tiny 1-bedroom thing. So some context there. And have you ever, because you're working with all these companies and talking to all these different people and thinking about intersectionality, have you come across a lot of fat phobia or fat bias in companies that that you've experienced?
I wouldn't say explicitly, but I definitely feel, especially when I'm working with a co-facilitator or like co-presenting with someone, I feel like people are a lot more likely to dismiss what I'm saying, or like look, especially if the person is like white, slim, especially if they're a man, they'll look to that person as like the source of expertise. And so I'm sort of like, sometimes I'm even mistaken as like their assistant, even though it's my company. And there's a lot, I mean, sometimes it's really hard for me to pinpoint which aspect of my identity I'm being discriminated for. But there's definitely, I think it's also about age, race, gender, size. Like, I'm not viewed as someone who has a wealth of knowledge or is extremely educated or competent to be doing this work. So it's a lot of like, I notice when I'm there alone, way more questions about my background, about my education, about my skills, like, have you actually done this before? Have you worked with a company our size before? And so if I'm with a co-facilitator, it's definitely like, I'll say something and they'll look to the other person for clarification, like translation of what I've said. So it's super interesting to notice those microaggressions and like how people view me in all my intersections of my identity as like, less competent or like less capable of, being in like a boardroom of like white exec men. It's pretty interesting.
That is wild. It's unbelievable. It's just mind blowing. It makes me think about this story about there's a football team in Vancouver called the Whitecaps, and the COO is a woman, and she told me there's been so many times her assistant is a 30-something white guy. The amount of times that she's walked into different rooms where people don't necessarily know the Whitecaps is what they're called, and people will assume that she's his assistant. And like, nice to meet you. And then we'll like showering the guy with attention, and and then the guy's like, I'm the assistant. It's just, it's wild.
It's super. It's so interesting, and like I've gotten to a point where I'm just like, whatever, like I know my worth and like I know that I'm capable, but definitely before that used to have a huge impact on me and like how I accessed spaces and how I felt comfortable in places.
Right. And that's just a perfect example of privilege, where you have to work that much harder to prove, hey, I know what I'm doing. Did we lose you? Maybe we lost Cicely.
No, I'm still here.
Come back.
Oh no.
Okay. Well, we were coming to the end of our interview anyway, so Cicely, where'd you go? So Cicely is obviously thebomb.com, and I have her website up on the screen, but I'm going to make sure that I share all the links to all the places that you can follow Cicely. So her website, cicelyblaineconsulting.com. And if you're not in Vancouver, don't worry, she has stuff going on online and lots of juicy stuff. So Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Fierce Fatty Meets, where I met Cicely. She is just a queen, and I love her. You should follow her. Until next time, my queens, I will see you again. Goodbye.